Beneath the ancient tree where words were sworn but never truly sealed, the Texas frontier stood at a crossroads. Between promises and betrayal, between diplomacy and survival. For Will Banta, the gathering of leaders was more than an agreement. It was a fragile attempt to bridge a divide carved by war and mistrust. Yet even as quills touched parchment, the question lingered. Would these oaths hold, or would time erase them as it had before? In the wake of Chief Wildcat's departure, Banta watched as history etched its mark upon the land. Uncertain whether this treaty would stand or fade like dust upon the wind. This is a story of broken promises, quiet resilience, and the unyielding truth that peace is never simply given, it is earned.
In the late fall of 1850, carried whispers of peace between the settlers on both sides of the Colorado River and all the wild tribes, or at least an attempt at it. A treaty was to be signed between the United States and several hostile tribes had been arranged, set to take place at the old Spanish mission on the San Saba River that December 10th, 1850. The frontier had suffered for years at the hands of these wild tribes, who had raided settlements, slaughtered settlers, and stolen livestock up and down both sides of the Colorado River. Burnett County, where I lived at the time, had not been spared. They had taken all our horses, leaving us defenseless, watching shadows flicker against the wilderness, wondering when the next raid would come. Major Neighbors, known for his dealings with native tribes as an Indian agent, would oversee the treaty negotiations, while General William S. Harney, a seasoned and unrelenting commander, was to support him with troops to bring some order to the chaos. Governor Peter H. Bell had issued a proclamation inviting all frontier settlers who had lost property to attend the treaty. If they could identify their stolen goods, they were to be returned. That promise was enough for me. Getting buckshot back was top on my list. I made arrangements with General Harney to meet him at Mason and ride with his company, determined to reclaim my and my family's stolen horses. But at that time, the frontier was still an untamed beast. There wasn't a single house west of the Colorado River, just endless stretches of rugged terrain crawling with danger. A man traveling alone was as good as dead. So, I rode out with my two companions, Nathaniel Holland and James Gilrath, both seasoned men of Burnett County. We were expecting to join the Army, roughly 80 miles west of our homes, a journey fraught with uncertainty. 3 days after leaving home, we reached Mason, our last taste of civilization before plunging into the unknown. Upon arrival, the officer in command, Brevet Major Hamilton W. Merrill, gave us a fierce warning. General Harney and his soldiers had already left 2 days prior, and striking out alone would be reckless. We were supposed to meet him and go with him, I said, trying not to show my irritation. Merrill let out a short, knowing huff, then adjusted the belt of his holster, tugging it slightly as if weighing his words. "Ah, well then, one thing you should know, General Harney waits for no one." There was no malice in his voice, no sympathy either, just a truth spoken by a man who had seen enough to know better than to expect leniency. He glanced toward the horizon, eyes narrowing like he could already see the storm brewing ahead. "The country is full of hostile Indians," he said, his words heavy with meaning. 3 men traveling alone might as well be ghosts already. Holland looked at me, his eyebrow curving so high it nearly disappeared beneath his hat, a silent but sarcastic question lingering in his expression. I turned to Gilreth, who exhaled slowly, already knowing the answer before any of us spoke. Without a word, our decision was made. Holland let out a quiet huff of laughter, shaking his head. "Well," he muttered, "guess we better make peace with our ghosts, then." We weren't the kind to turn back. The dangers ahead weren't enough to shake us. We were men of the frontier and rangers. We knew the risk, and sometimes we welcomed it. Rather than following the army's exact trail, which we learned would take them on a detour due to scarce water sources, we decided to cut through the mountains, hoping to intercept them sooner. The way the wild presents itself is always uncertain, winding through rocky passes with no clear path. All day we rode looking for their trail, but we only found evidence of Indian movement. We saw no living soul. Nightfall came. We camped beneath the cold stars, wolves howling in the distance. They weren't the only things watching us. I was sure of it. We settled into uneasy rest, knowing that at any moment, eyes could be upon us, waiting. At dawn, we saddled up and pressed forward, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavy on us. By 8 o'clock, we stumbled upon a massive trail of horsemen. Hoping it belonged to the soldiers, we followed it, feeling a surge of relief. The idea of finding the army gave us new strength. Then, just past 11 o'clock, we spotted something. Not soldiers, horses, hundreds of them. A herd gathered near a vast encampment. My stomach clenched. This was no cavalry. Before we could react, it hit us. We were standing in the middle of 7,000 wild Indians. Death on all sides. To run was death. To stand was death. To fight was worse than foolishness. We had ridden straight into the heart of their camp. In an instant, 3 Indian warriors emerged, approaching us swiftly. They had seen us before we had seen them. Their painted faces were unreadable, their movements calculated. One spoke. "Captain Camp," he said. We had no choice but to obey. We dismounted. Our saddles and baggage were stripped. One Indian took our horses and led them away, swallowed into the great herd. Then a figure approached, the Muskogee chief, Black Horse. His dark eyes studied us, then flicked his hand toward 3 warriors standing nearby. "Kaha," he commanded, his voice firm, the word carrying the weight of authority. Black Horse turned to us, his gaze measured, then said, "Guards." The word landed like a stone, firm and absolute. They would ensure we did not leave. The Muskogee chief then spoke in signs and gestures, making clear that as long as we remained in camp, we would not be harmed. A fragile promise in a sea of threats. But they wanted something. They were looking for the army, and we tried to convince them they were close, though in truth we had no idea. Then Black Horse did something unexpected. Black Horse lingered near our fire as we brewed the coffee, his presence a shadow against the flickering flames, watching us with quiet intensity. The heat from the fire licked at the chilled air, the aroma of boiling grounds mixing with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. None of us spoke, not to him, not to each other. The crackling logs sent up tiny bursts of ember, and every time the pot shifted over the flames, the tension seemed to shift with it. Holland sat stiffly, turning the coffee absent-mindedly, his fingers curling tighter around the spoon. Gilreth kept his eyes trained on the liquid, but his foot nudged at the dirt, small nervous movements betraying his stillness. Black Horse's gaze never wavered, weighing us. When we finished preparing it, I turned toward him and gestured to the pot, an offering, a simple act of frontier hospitality. For a moment, he didn't react. The silence stretched, longer than it should have. Then, his dark eyes flicked toward me, measured, unreadable. He didn't reach for the cup. He didn't shake his head. He simply studied me, like a man weighing something unseen, something beyond the coffee itself. A decision, a judgment. The fire crackled between us. The coffee sat untouched. Then finally he spoke. Vamonos. I barely had time to react before he grabbed me by the arm, pulling me away from camp. I didn't struggle. What would be the point? Behind me, I heard Holland murmur to Gilreth. His voice, flat and fatalistic, was loud enough for everyone around us to hear. Hey, Nat, they're gonna roast Banta for dinner, and we'll go for supper and breakfast for sure. The word roast sent an involuntary chill through me. The chief beside me cut his eyes at me, like he knew full well what my friend said. Death was one thing. I had accepted my fate a long time ago, but to be killed and roasted? Oh my! The thought made my blood run cold. And yet, somehow I kept walking into the depths of the encampment, toward whatever fate awaited me. As Black Horse led me deeper into the encampment, the sea of warriors and women shifted. They rose from their fires and peeked out their teepees and closed in around me with growing curiosity. The pulling at my hair, the tugging at my beard, it was relentless. Sweaty, calloused fingers scraped against my scalp, twisting strands between them before yanking hard, testing whether my hair was real. The sensation sent a dull ache down my neck, but I held firm. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and charred meat, a mixture so dense it settled deep in my lungs. Somewhere in the distance, the crackle of fresh logs thrown onto a fire sent up a burst of smoke that mixed with the scent of sweat, earth, and damp leather. A hand slid roughly down my sleeve, picking at the fabric of my coat like it was something foreign. Fingers traced the stitching along my collar, pressing against my belt, testing the weight of the buckle with a murmured fascination. My boots were nudged by bare feet, dusty soles scraping against the worn leather, testing the strange material. All around me, low voices hummed, hushed whispers threading between short bursts of laughter. I kept still. Don't flinch. Don't pull away. Then, amid the sea of grasping hands, I heard it. A soft jingle, rhythmic, distinct. The sound of bells, impossibly small, yet sharp enough to cut through the murmuring voices. The warriors shifted. Some stepped back. Others simply turned their heads, as if acknowledging something greater. Chief Wildcat, even among his own people, his presence was unmistakable. He was taller than most, standing at 6'1", his sharp eyes flicking over the scene, framed by jet-black brows that cast shadows over a gaze that could pierce through stone. His braid, thick and interwoven with strands of other hair, nearly reached the ground, weighed down by silver plates, each catching the faintest glint of light. 3 bells at the end of his braid whispered as he moved, a soft, deliberate warning of his approach. Every step sent a faint chime into the air, delicate but unmistakable. I dared not move. Wildcat tilted his head slightly, taking in the sight before him. Me, standing stiffly under the weight of a dozen curious hands, my beard still tangled in someone's grip, my sleeve tugged at like a piece of fine cloth held before a merchant. Then, to my surprise, his lips twitched in amusement. "Banta," he said, his voice low but firm. "You always did have a way of drawing attention." The hands released me, hesitant at first, then fully withdrawing, like children caught in the act. Wildcat's gaze lingered for a moment before shifting toward Black Horse, his expression unreadable. Then his smile widened slightly, as if just putting a puzzle together. "Black Horse says you fear they plan to roast you." A wave of heat crawled up my neck. I cleared my throat. "Well, can you blame me?" Wildcat chuckled, folding his arms across his chest. "You are worth more alive than dead." He stepped closer, the bells at his braid chiming softly against the earth. Then, in a voice quiet enough to be just for me, he added, "Don't worry, they won't roast you. Not today, anyway." I looked at Chief Wildcat, and then at Chief Black Horse. Their eyes sparkled with an internal laughter. I just shook my head, thinking it was best I not say anything with a massive crowd of Indians around me. "Come, Banta, we smoke." Wildcat turns and walks back to his teepee. His 2 wives were outside the tent cooking. Several children were running around trying to swipe food. Chief Wildcat's guardians and Chief Black Horse followed us. Wildcat opened the tent flap and entered the teepee. The flap fell, and I heard Wildcat say, "Enter, Banta." So I did. There was a small fire in the center, and smoke rose in a spiral, escaping through the top. I noticed bedrolls halfway around the circle. On the other half, baskets held food or clothing. I wasn't really sure what was inside. I also noticed Chief Buffalo Hump was already inside smoking. I had heard rumors that he was a constant smoker. Chief Wildcat's 2 guardians entered next, and after a couple of beats I heard Wildcat say, "Black Horse, enter." We all were positioned around the fire. Since I had never met Buffalo Hump, Chief Wildcat said, "Banta." He motions his hand toward the smoking man. "Pachana Korhip, Chief Buffalo Hump." I nod my head and say, "It is nice to meet you, Pachana Korhip." "Banta, you are getting better with language, yes?" "I am trying to learn." I returned, which was true. If I was to be a good Texas Ranger, I needed to be able to communicate with everyone. I watched the chief load his tomahawk pipe with tobacco carefully. I saw him grab a small stick from the fire and light his pipe, inhaling in deep, holding it in his chest, before exhaling. It was like a fascinating ritual to watch him do this each time we are together. He handed me his pipe, and I copied his every move before he said, "So, Banta, why you know with army troops?" Chief Wildcat wasted no time to get to the immediate question. "We were supposed to, but General Harney left without us. We were going to cut through the mountains to catch up with them, but somehow we were way ahead of them." I said. Wildcat stiffened at Harney's name, his jaw tightening. Then, without warning, he spit into the fire. The flames hissed as the liquid met the embers. Outside the tent, the soft clatter of a cooking pot faltered, as if someone had dropped something. I hesitated, still holding his tomahawk pipe, suddenly unsure if I should hand it back. The weight of it felt different now, as if his anger had settled into the wood. I carefully asked, "Do you know him?" Wildcat's lip curled in disgust. "Yes. Bad man Harney. Bad." Another sharp spit into the fire. Buffalo Hump had stopped smoking. Just beyond the tent, the voices of playing children quieted, their laughter fading as the air inside grew dense with unspoken tension. Somewhere near the entrance, a warrior shifted his footing, the slight crunch of earth barely audible. Wildcat looked up, his voice dropping low, a tone meant for the ears of men who listened, not just heard. "When I lived Florida, with my people, Seminole, we fight white man for land, ancestors' grounds, hunting grounds, places we worship our gods. Taken. His words carried beyond the fire, beyond the tent. The soft shuffle of movement outside, barely noticeable at first, grew as a few men slowly gathered near the entrance, drawn by the voice of their chief. The weight of his words lingered in the air, pressing down like smoke curling toward the roof. Inside, Buffalo Hump stared at the fire, the pipe in his hand forgotten, embers gone cold. Black Horse remained silent. The tent had become more than just a place of conversation. It had become a space of remembrance, of silent witness to a history carried in Wildcat's voice. His voice carried the rhythm of a story often told but never softened. We fight. Long time. Many dead. My father, Chief Philip, how you say his name. I call him Amathla. He captured, killed. I was 25. A pause. A quiet inhale. I watched him stare at the flames, reliving every moment. Harney, take mother. Take daughter. Say I surrender. They come back. His eyes flicked toward the rising smoke, watching it swirl the way a man watches something too far gone to reach. I surrender. I bring warriors, 19, last of my band. We think peace talk. No. It lie. They put us in iron box. Laugh. Call us dumb Indians. Another pause. A deeper inhale. Wildcat looked at me then. His stare was intense. We no dumb Indian. Box have no walls. I see warriors. They see me. We no eat. 6 days. Soldiers bring food. It smell wrong. We no touch. They just laugh. I leaned forward, listening. Everyone else did too. Wildcat's fingers tapped the ground beside him. A rhythmic motion, almost unconscious. After 6 days we skinny. Bars not made good. We slip through. Escape. Go home. His gaze hardened. No mother. No daughter. The silence that followed felt heavier than words could explain. Then finally a low, resigned breath. Never see them again. Buffalo Hump stared at the fire, the pipe in his hand forgotten. Black Horse remained unreadable. The guardians shifted slightly, but said nothing. I swallowed. That's awful, I muttered, thinking of Lucinda home pregnant with our child, my voice barely above the crackling flames. Wildcat didn't answer. Instead, after a long pause, he asked, "Who else come with Harney?" I hesitated before answering. A guy named Neighbors. Wildcat's body stiffened again. Another sharp spit into the fire. My eyes widened again. Wildcat exhaled sharply, then spoke. 1841. Feeling the weight of the story still pressing against me as I rose from my place by the fire and nodded. Outside, the air felt cooler than before, or maybe it was just the contrast between the heat of the tent and the cold reality of Wildcat's past. A few warriors stood near the entrance, watching, their expressions blank. Further off, Wildcat's wives continued their work, but their movements stilled as I emerged from the tent. They remained deliberate, quiet, as if still listening to echoes of the conversation. I turned toward the camp, where my own men waited. Whatever I was feeling, I knew Holland would be ready with some remark, one way or another. Black Horse arrived in the morning, stepping into our camp with measured authority. His gaze flicked over the group before settling on Holland. Without preamble, he reached out, gripping Holland's arm firmly. "Vamos," he said. Holland raised a brow, but didn't resist, allowing himself to be led toward the center of camp. I expected him to keep quiet, to let the moment pass without incident. I should have known better. We learned later a gathering of warriors, women, elders, and children formed, some watching with curiosity, others murmuring. Holland, never one to let a crowd go to waste, straightened dramatically, adjusting his coat like he was about to make a grand speech. "All right now, folks," he declared. "Take a good look. This is what frontier excellence looks like." Black Horse didn't react, but the corners of his mouth twitched, just slightly. Then out of nowhere, a small child stepped forward, studying Holland with wide, fascinated eyes. A quick jab to Holland's stomach. A poke. Holland froze, blinking down at the boy. The little one turned to his friends, hesitated, then poked him again, twice this time, quicker. Silence. Then Holland clutched his belly with exaggerated horror, staggering back like he'd been mortally wounded. "Ah, he got me," he declared, collapsing onto one knee like he'd taken a bullet straight to the gut. A burst of laughter rippled through the crowd. Some warriors exchanged amused glances. Others shook their heads at the ridiculousness of it all. By the time Holland was returned to camp before midday, his shirt had been tugged, his hair slightly ruffled, and he wore the smug expression of a man who had thoroughly entertained himself. "You boys jealous?" he asked, dusting himself off. Gilreth just shook his head, knowing his turn was coming next. Black Horse arrived again, stepping into our camp with the same quiet air he had before. This time, his gaze settled on Gilreth. Without a word, he reached out, gripping Gilreth's arm firmly. Gilreth glanced at me briefly, his face expressionless, before allowing himself to be led away. As they approached the center of camp, the gathering of warriors, elders, and children grew larger than before. This wasn't just curiosity. It felt like a deliberate examination, as if Gilreth were being presented for study. The crowd pressed closer, murmuring in their own languages, their eyes fixed on him with intense focus. One elder stepped forward first, his face lined with age and wisdom. He gestured toward Gilreth, then spoke briefly to Black Horse, who nodded. The elder reached out, his fingers brushing Gilreth's jaw, then gently tilting his head to the side. Gilreth stiffened but didn't resist. The elder leaned closer, peering into his mouth, his ears, even lifting his chin to examine his nose. Another warrior stepped forward, gesturing toward Gilreth's hands. He turned them over, studying the calluses and lines, murmuring something to the others. Gilreth's discomfort was palpable, but he remained still, his gaze flicking toward Black Horse, who watched silently. Then A younger man stepped forward, gesturing toward Gilreth's coat. Gilreth hesitated, his hands instinctively tightening around the fabric. The younger man spoke again, his tone insistent, and Black Horse gave a single nod. Reluctantly, Gilreth removed his coat, revealing the shirt beneath. The crowd murmured louder now, their curiosity growing. One woman stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied the buttons and stitching, her fingers brushing the fabric lightly. Gilreth's jaw tightened as another warrior gestured toward his boots. "Not happening," he muttered under his breath. The examination continued for what felt like hours, each movement deliberate, each gesture carrying the weight of cultural curiosity and silent judgment. By the time Gilreth was returned to camp, his coat was rumpled, his boots slightly scuffed, and his expression was one of exhausted bewilderment. Holland let out a sharp laugh, clapping him on the back. "Don't worry, Gil. You're still prettier than me." Gilreth just shook his head, sinking onto the nearest log. The next morning was still when Wildcat arrived. He did not come alone. His wives rode beside him, their movements deliberate, their faces difficult to read, while his children lingered just behind, their small, curious gazes flicking toward me and my men. Wildcat's guardians followed, their presence ever watchful, silent pillars to his authority. At a distance, several warriors stood, neither approaching nor speaking, just watching. It wasn't an army. It wasn't a display of power. It was something quieter, something final. Wildcat came to a stop near my camp, his gaze sweeping over us before settling on me. I stepped forward, instinctively reading the shift in the air. He was leaving. "You're not staying?" I asked. His fingers rested lightly on the reins, his grip loose, but his body held a quiet tension. "No." A simple answer, but his voice carried weight. "Where will you go?" He turned his head slightly, eyes narrowing as he considered the question. "Always somewhere." A pause, then quieter. "Never one place. Never trust treaty. Words no always truth." His gaze flicked briefly to the sky, as if weighing something unseen, then back to me. "Men talk peace, but peace easy to break." I didn't argue. I knew he was right. Without another word, Wildcat nudged his horse forward, and I watched as he rode out. Not in haste, not in anger, but with the deliberate certainty of a man who had long since learned the weight of promises. He did not wait for Harney. He did not need to. Behind him, his wives and guardians followed without a word, slipping into the rhythm of his movement as if they had known, long before today, that this was how it would be. The onlookers at a distance shifted, some murmuring to one another, but none calling after him. There was no need. He had already said everything worth saying. Black Horse slowly walked to our camp a while after Wildcat rode off, his presence marked by an undercurrent. Something felt different this time. He stopped a few paces from us, letting his gaze sweep over the camp before speaking. "Harney, come," he said, pointing off into the distance. "No more guards." I exchanged a glance with Holland, who raised a brow but said nothing. Black Horse continued, his voice even. "They not for us. They for you." I nodded slowly, taking in the meaning behind the words. the watchful eyes, the silent warriors stationed near us. It was never about keeping us contained, but keeping us protected. As Black Horse finished speaking, I hesitated, feeling the weight of the realization settle. Then, after a brief pause, I asked, "Would it be possible to search for our horses?" Black Horse studied me for a moment, then turned toward the warriors who had been stationed near us throughout our time in the camp. With a single, sharp gesture, he motioned for them to follow us. No words were exchanged, but the understanding was immediate. They would accompany us as we searched the herds. I nodded in silent gratitude. Holland clapped his hands together. "Well then, let's find Buckshot." I only hoped we would. As we moved toward the herds, the sense of freedom was undeniable. There were no more guards watching over us, no silent sentinels ensuring we stayed in one place. But that didn't mean we were alone. The first sign came when I caught a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye, a small figure ducking behind a tree. Then another, a pair of dark eyes peering from another tree, watching us. Holland nudged me lightly. "You feelin' watched, or is it just me?" Gilreth didn't answer. He was already glancing behind him, where two braver children had crept closer, trailing us like shadowy specters, their eyes filled with cautious curiosity. One of them, a boy no older than 6 or 7, took a step forward, his gaze locked onto my boots. Then, before I could take another step, the boy darted forward, his small fingers grazing the edge of my coat sleeve, before immediately retreating. Fast as a rabbit, I glanced down, catching the fleeting flicker of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, before he vanished behind his friends. Holland chuckled under his breath. "Better keep an eye on your coat. Might not have it by the time we leave." I shook my head, letting the moment pass. There were more important things to focus on, like finding Buckshot. It didn't take long to realize Buckshot was gone. I combed the herd twice, my chest growing tighter with every pass. Nothing. The Comanches had stolen him before our arrival, and now, with the treaty looming, there was no way to recover him. The loss sank deep. Buckshot wasn't just a horse. He had carried me through rough country, through fire and dust, through nights when only his breathing kept me company. Gilreth rested a hand on my shoulder. He was a damn fine horse. I nodded once, swallowing the feeling before it could settle too heavily. The warriors trailing us watched. There was nothing to be done. The arrival of Harney's soldiers shifted the entire atmosphere. What had once been an assembly of warriors, families, and tribal leaders discussing their own future suddenly felt like something more rigid, more controlled. Harney rode into the heart of the encampment, his sharp gaze sweeping over the gathered leaders. His expression was hard to read, but his posture was unmistakably authoritative. This was not a man who had come to be challenged. Beside him, neighbors sat stiffly, scanning the crowd, his brow furrowed as his eyes darted from face to face. Something was missing. Harney didn't wait long before speaking. "Where's Wildcat?" His voice carried enough force that several warriors exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Silence stretched for a moment too long. Finally, Black Horse answered, his tone even giving away nothing. "Gone." Harney's jaw tightened. "Gone where?" Black Horse's response was deliberate, measured. "He always move. No one place." Neighbors exhaled sharply, rubbing his chin. This gathering, this treaty, it concerns him. Why would he leave? Black Horse did not answer immediately. Instead, he held Harney's gaze with quiet confidence. He does not trust treaty. Men talk peace, but peace easy to break. The words lingered between them. Harney's fingers curled against the reins, his eyes narrowing slightly. He knew we were coming, didn't he? Black Horse gave a slow nod. He knew. The tension shifted. This wasn't just a missing leader. It was something far more calculated. Wildcat had left before Harney ever had the chance to speak to him. Harney straightened in his saddle, his expression unreadable. Maybe it was irritation. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was neither. Either way, Wildcat had made his move first. In the end, we bought 2 mules before setting our sights on home. We didn't stay for the final treaty negotiations. When the time came to leave, our horses were brought to us, and as we prepared to mount, something unexpected happened. As we started off, some of the Indians came to say goodbye. Not the leaders, but the warriors, the women, and dozens of children. Some offered quiet nods. Others clasped our hands briefly. There was no grand gesture, no speech, just a simple acknowledgement. It was enough. As we rode out, I glanced back at the sprawling encampment, the towering tree under which words were promised, but never recorded. I thought of Wildcat, his departure before the ink ever touched the page. Maybe he had been right. Maybe peace was always easy to break. From a distance, I observed a collection of leaders, warriors, interpreters, and military officers filled the space, each marked by presence as distinct as their names: Comanche chiefs, Lipan captains, Mescalero representatives, and the hardened men of the U.S. military. Some sat in solemn thought, their expressions carved by years of leadership and survival, while others spoke in low, deliberate tones, their voices barely carrying beyond the huddled circle. The tree itself seemed to bear witness, its gnarled roots anchoring into the soil, as if holding firm against the shifting promises etched into words. I had seen plenty of negotiations, plenty of oaths sworn by men who rarely kept them. But this felt different. The sheer number of leaders, the thousands of warriors beyond the clearing, made the silence around the gathering feel both sacred and fragile. Nearby, Holland stood a few paces back, arms crossed, his usual smirk absent. Gilreth lingered beside him, his gaze fixed on the chiefs, trying to decipher something unspoken in their stance, their expressions, their silence. The ceremony beneath the tree unfolded not with spectacle, but with quiet intensity. Signatures and marks laid against parchment, seals pressed, gestures exchanged. The faint scratching of quills against parchment, the rustle of cloth, and the shifting of boots in the dirt carried through the space, reinforcing the weight of each action. Yet, despite it all, the unanswered question hung in the air. Not what was said, but what wasn't. Wildcat had left. Would it matter? Would any of this matter when the ink dried? I exhaled, shifting slightly, casting one last glance toward the gathered men. Soon, they would leave this place, stepping back into the land that had long been contested, long been promised, long been lost.
Like whispers carried by the breeze, some treaties fade before they can be genuinely embraced. The Texas frontier was never confined by mere signatures, borders, or agreements. It was forged by the indomitable spirit of its people, those who toiled, those who defended it, and those who bore the weight of loss. Throughout his journey, Banta discovered the resilience of those on the other side, learning of their struggles and the fierce love they held for their families and land. Thank you for watching another Banta story. As you journey onward, may you hold steadfast in your convictions and keep your spirit unwavering. When the wild expanse challenges your resolve, lean on those who walk alongside you and forge ahead. The frontier does not yield to uncertainty, nor do those who possess the courage to confront it. Until next time, remember, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the will to face it and press on, no matter the odds.